Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that a lot of people seem to have this overdeveloped sense of loyalty or identification with the company they work for? They talk about the company's goals as if they were their own. And they burn themselves out chasing metrics they didn't really set. They're chasing deadlines that really have no bearing in their life. And they say things like our mission, our culture, our bottom line. And it's not their bottom line. It's the bottom line of the company. They don't own the company. They're not building their fortune or their legacy. They're doing it for other people that would get rid of them in a heartbeat without a second thought. And this crazy phenomenon is called false ownership or illusory ownership. And it's an engineered belief that you should treat the company's goals as if they were your own, even when you really have no stake in the outcome. It really doesn't matter either way what happens. Does the company make more money or not make more money? Your check, your bottom line doesn't change. But this isn't a mistake. This is intentional. Companies don't just want your time and your skills. They want your identity, because once you start identifying with the company and the company's goals and treating it like it's your family, then you're really hooked. You're in, and you're a lot easier to control at that point. When you've adopted that mindset, it's great for them because you will work harder without any more pay. You will self-police and police other people, and we've got to work harder to achieve this goal. And if you burn out, you're going to blame yourself. You're not going to blame the system or the company. It's like, you see it as a personal failing. And this sense of false ownership, it doesn't happen by accident. It's built into the language and the culture and the incentive structures of the companies themselves. And come on, be honest, you've heard these phrases. Act like an owner. We're all family here. It's not just a job, it's a mission, right? These phrases aren't harmless. They are psychological framing devices, and they're designed to kind of blur the frame between you and the company, so you really start to identify with them and your goals, and you start to treat their goals as your own and start to think of them as very important. And I've watched people when I've gone to a lot of companies, and they're leaned over the desks and they're talking about these metrics in the next quarter and all this stuff, and they're not going to get a bonus. They're not going to get an incentive, and they're talking about everything. Oh, the production. What's our profit and loss statement? And none of this matters to their paycheck. None of it. If you believe that the company's success is your success, then you will sacrifice more and you'll ask for less. And that's exactly what they want. What are you going to get? Employee of the month, a special parking spot. I go to Amazon, the number one loader or stower or picker. Well, they have special parking spots near the door. That's great, wonderful. They have to walk a little less. Does it reflect in their paycheck? No, of course not. And I got a real taste of this when I worked for Walmart. And we had to do this cheer in the morning. If you've ever been in Walmart in the morning and heard the cheer, it's a little bit scary, a little bit cultish. And they would ask us, whose Walmart is it? And we'd have to say, it's my Walmart. It was not our Walmart. But we were told to act as if it was. When you're a department manager, they would tell you, okay, you're going to treat this department as your own personal business and figure out how to market items and to increase the sales of that department and all this sort of stuff. You know what you got if you did that? Nothing. The most we could chase is a pie-in-the-sky bonus, which in 4.5 years we never got. And it was based upon the performance of the entire store. And the metrics, the way they would measure this, those were hidden from us. They were not for our discovery. But we did know that we could all do great and meet all these goals. But if somebody slipped and fell in the parking lot, well, that would take away from the bottom line of the company, and we wouldn't get the goals that month. No bonus. There's another company I go into, and I can't name them because I'd probably get fired or in trouble, but they have the various departments compete against each other. And these are people that are making things. And so the ones that are doing the best, well, they're publicly praised, while the ones that are doing the worst, well, they're actually publicly shamed. Great, right? It's competition. Well, who wins in that case? Do these people win? No, the company does. And there's this story I heard as a kid, and I really loved the story at the time because I was into this whole productivity and we can achieve great things together and all this kind of stuff. I've kind of changed my tune now that I see what was really going on. But this factory had 2 shifts, and they were making some real big thing. I had no idea what the hell it is, but they typically made 2 a shift. Well, one day the people on second shift came into the factory on their shift, and there was this big giant yellow 3 marked on the floor in chalk. And they asked, well, what the hell is this 3? And the manager said, well, that's how many of the thing the first shift made. And he walked away. And so a couple days later, as the first shifters were walking in, they saw a big 4 on the floor. And of course, the story goes on. I think they got to something like an average of 5 or 6 every single day. And that sounds wonderful. And look at this progress and motivating people to do great work. And they didn't actually make any more money. They weren't rewarded for their hard work. Who won in that story? The owner of the company. But these people were given a sense of ownership and now competing against each other because their self-worth, their identity was based upon their productivity. Kind of a brilliant strategy, huh? And this ends up being a normalized identity pathology where people define themselves by their work. They define themselves by their role, and they define themselves based upon the success of the company or the success of their department. And you can watch this. They will sacrifice their health, they'll sacrifice their relationships, they'll sacrifice their dreams, all to serve a structure that sees them as completely replaceable. And it becomes this pathological, self-reinforcing system. The harder you work, the more invested you feel. The more invested you feel, the more loss you fear if you stop working so hard. And that fear of loss keeps you compliant. You don't need to be chained to your desk when you've internalized the company's goals as your own. You're already under control. And the really weird thing for me was I was insulated from this phenomenon for 18 years. From age 18 on, I worked for the state. I worked with people with developmental disabilities, so it was a state-funded program. It wasn't something that depended upon profit. It wasn't utopia, but it wasn't corporate-driven. And when I had to go back into the regular workplace, I was floored by a number of things that I'd been insulated from, but one of them was the whole corporate mentality. And when I started working for bigger companies, I was really just floored by how much ownership people were expected to take and how much ownership people really did take. From the peons like me all the way to the top level of management, where they really felt as if this is our company, this is our family, this is our mission. And they drove these metrics and went after these goals with wholeheartedly and got upset if they weren't going to make them. There was all this performance urgency for no reward, and it was towards a company that would drop you in a heartbeat if it served them. It did and still does feel surreal when I watch people do this. They kind of wring themselves dry for a system that doesn't care about them. And they'll defend the system. And I understand how that can happen. I understand having a good work ethic. I understand wanting to be productive and do a good job for your employer, and having some initiative when you see something else that's maybe not in your job description, doing that and all that sort of thing in order to feel like you're actually being productive. And I found out quickly that this could get you promoted, but the promotions meant you got a lot more work and you didn't get too much extra pay because they just noticed that you were somebody that was willing to go above and beyond. So they would let you. I used to get a little mad at people that didn't put as much effort into this, their job as I did. Actually, I would get a lot mad sometimes. And looking back on it now, I understand what they were doing because they weren't going to put any more effort into a job that, once again, would get rid of them in a heartbeat and really didn't care. They would get paid the same amount of money. And it's really kind of entertaining now. There's this thing called quiet quitting that's going around. And what it is you're not supposed to put any more effort into your job than you absolutely have to. You don't have to go above and beyond. And, somebody clued me in the other day to the idea that this is called doing your job. That's what quiet quitting is. So why does this all matter, really? Well, this isn't just a rant, and it's not just a complaint about toxic work culture. It's a warning. It's a warning about what happens when people are taught to internalize goals they didn't choose, sacrifice energy they will never get back, and define success by alignment with somebody else's agenda. And that's not the worst of it, because the more you align with a company that you don't own, the harder it is to remember who you were before you started working there, and the more guilty you'll feel when you want to walk away, even when it's killing you. If any of this resonates with you, congratulations. It doesn't mean that you're broken by the system. It means that you're waking up and seeing the truth for what it is. This lie of false ownership is so toxic and so dangerous because it hides behind really noble-sounding values like loyalty and commitment and purpose and hard work. But what good is loyalty to a machine that doesn't care about you, doesn't have your name on the door, and will get rid of you in a heartbeat if the budget shifts? The system is not yours. And the sooner you stop pretending that it is, the sooner you can start building something that is yours. Ownership isn't just a legal status, it's a mindset, and it's time to reclaim it, not just from the company, but from the version of you that handed it over to them in the first place. If you like this video, go ahead and like it, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and I would love to hear your comments about this. If you can identify with this phenomenon, or if you've been one of those people that's really taken that strong sense of ownership, I'd love to hear about it.